Have you ever felt like no matter how much you have, it's never quite enough? Maybe you've scrolled through social media and felt that familiar pang of wanting what someone else has. Or perhaps you've achieved a goal you worked so hard for, only to find that the satisfaction fades quickly, leaving you hungry for the next thing. If any of this sounds familiar, you're not alone. What you're experiencing is something the Buddha identified over 2,500 years ago as one of the fundamental causes of human suffering. Today, we're going to talk about greed, about craving, and about how this ancient wisdom can transform the way you experience your life right now, in this very moment. Before we dive deep into this journey together, I want to ask you something. If you're finding value in what we explore here, please take just a moment to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. It really helps us reach more people who might benefit from these teachings. And if something resonates with you today, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or experiences. This community thrives on our shared journey toward understanding and peace. Now, let's begin. There's a teaching in Buddhism called the Three Poisons, and greed sits right at the center of this ancient diagnosis of human suffering. The Buddha didn't speak about greed as a moral failing or something to feel guilty about. Instead, he saw it as a natural tendency of the untrained mind, something that arises when we don't understand the true nature of reality. Think of it like this. If you didn't know that touching a hot stove would burn you, you might reach out and touch it. Greed is similar. We reach for things, experiences, and states of being because we don't yet understand that this very reaching is what causes us pain. In the Pali Canon, the Buddha uses the word tanha, which translates to thirst or craving. Imagine being desperately thirsty in a desert. That's the energy of craving. It's not a gentle preference or a mild interest. It's an urgent, compelling force that drives us forward, always seeking, always wanting, never satisfied. The Buddha taught that this craving comes in three forms: craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, and craving for non-existence. But at their root, they all share the same quality. They all arise from a fundamental misunderstanding about what will actually bring us happiness. There was once a wealthy merchant who had accumulated vast riches. His warehouses were filled with precious goods, his coffers overflowed with gold, and his reputation extended across many lands. Yet despite all this abundance, he couldn't sleep at night. He would lie awake, worrying about his possessions, fearing thieves, anxious about market fluctuations, concerned that he might lose what he had worked so hard to accumulate. One day, he encountered a wandering monk who owned nothing but his robes and his begging bowl. The merchant, curious, asked the monk, "How can you be so peaceful when you have nothing?" The monk smiled and replied, "How can you be so anxious when you have everything?" This simple exchange stopped the merchant in his tracks. He realized that his wealth hadn't brought him peace. In fact, the more he had, the more he had to worry about, the more he had to protect, the more he feared losing. This story illustrates something profound about the nature of greed. It's not really about the objects we desire. It's about the relationship we have with desire itself. The Buddha taught in the Dhammapada, the craving of one given to heedless living grows like a creeper. Like the monkey seeking fruits in the forest, he leaps from life to to life. This image is so vivid. Picture a monkey swinging from branch to branch, always reaching for the next fruit, never stopping to enjoy the one it just grabbed. That's how craving operates in our lives. We achieve one goal, acquire one thing, experience one pleasure, and almost immediately, our attention shifts to the next desire. Now, you might be thinking, but isn't it natural to want things? Isn't ambition important? Don't we need desire to motivate us? These are excellent questions, and they get to the heart of a common misunderstanding about Buddhist teachings. The Buddha wasn't advocating for a life of complete passivity or the elimination of all preferences. What he was pointing to was the difference between skillful intention and unskillful craving. Skillful intention moves us toward actions that reduce suffering for ourselves and others. Unskillful craving binds us to a cycle of temporary satisfaction, followed by renewed dissatisfaction. There's a famous Zen story about a student who came to his master and said, "Master, I want enlightenment more than anything in the world. I crave it day and night. What should I do?" The master took the student to a nearby river and suddenly pushed his head underwater. Holding it there, the student struggled desperately, fighting for air. Just before he would have drowned, the master pulled him up. Gasping and coughing, the student demanded to know why the master had done such a thing. The master replied calmly, "When you want enlightenment as desperately as you just wanted air, you will find it. But notice this. When you were under the water, you weren't thinking about enlightenment. You weren't craving some future state. You were completely present with the urgent need of that moment." The teaching here is subtle but powerful. Even our spiritual seeking can become another form of craving, another way we avoid being fully present with what is. The Buddha's teaching on greed goes even deeper when we look at the second noble truth, which states that the origin of suffering is craving. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha explains, "It is this craving which leads to renewed existence, accompanied by delight and lust, seeking delight here and there. That is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, craving for extermination." Notice that the Buddha links craving directly to suffering. This isn't a punishment or a moral judgment. It's a description of cause and effect, as reliable as gravity. When we crave, we suffer. Not because wanting things is bad, but because craving creates a fundamental tension between what is and what we wish would be. Let's bring this into your everyday life. Think about the last time you really wanted something. Maybe it was a new phone, a relationship, a job promotion, or even just a good night's sleep. Notice what happened in your mind and body when that desire arose. There was probably a sense of lack, a feeling that something was missing, that you weren't complete without this thing. Then, if you got what you wanted, there was likely a moment of satisfaction, maybe even joy. But how long did that feeling last? For most of us, the satisfaction is remarkably brief. Soon, the mind is off, chasing the next desire, creating the next sense of lack. This pattern is what the Buddha called samsara, the wheel of becoming, the cycle of birth and death, of gaining and losing, of pleasure and pain. And here's the really interesting part. We don't have to wait until physical death to experience this cycle. We experience it moment by moment throughout each day. Every time a desire arises and we identify with it, we're born into a new state of wanting. Every time that desire is satisfied or frustrated, we experience a small death, and immediately a new desire arises, and the cycle continues. The great Zen master Dogen wrote, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things." What does this have to do with greed? Everything. Greed is fundamentally about the self, about this sense of being a separate individual who lacks something and needs to acquire it to be complete. When we really investigate this sense of self, when we study it closely, as Dogen suggests, something remarkable happens. We begin to see that this solid, permanent self we've been trying to satisfy doesn't actually exist in the way we thought it did. There's another story. A young monk approached the great master Ajahn Chah and complained, "Master, I meditate every day, but I still have so many desires. I still want things. I still feel greedy. What am I doing wrong?" Ajahn Chah picked up a glass of water that was sitting nearby and held it up. "Do you see this glass?" he asked. "I love this glass. It holds water perfectly. It catches the light beautifully. But for me, this glass is already broken. Somewhere in the future, someone will knock it over, or it will slip from someone's hand, or it will simply wear out. It's already broken. So, when I use this glass and hold it, I appreciate it fully. And when it breaks, I say, 'Of course.'" He paused and looked at the young monk. "Your desires are like this glass. They're already broken. They're already impermanent. When you truly understand this, you can have preferences, you can enjoy things, but you won't be enslaved by craving." This teaching points to one of the most practical aspects of working with greed: understanding impermanence. Everything changes. Everything passes. The things we crave will either never arrive, or they'll arrive and then change or leave. The Buddha taught in the Anguttara Nikaya, "All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering." This isn't meant to be depressing. In fact, understanding impermanence is incredibly liberating. When we truly grasp that nothing lasts, we can appreciate what's here now without desperately clinging to it. We can want things without being consumed by that wanting. Let's talk about how this actually works in practice, because understanding these teachings intellectually is just the beginning. The real transformation happens when we apply them to our lived experience. The next time you notice a strong desire arising, try this. Instead of immediately moving to satisfy it or suppress it, just pause. Take a breath. Notice where you feel the desire in your body. Is there tension? A sense of urgency? A feeling of incompleteness? Just observe these sensations without judgment. Notice the thoughts that accompany the desire. I need this. I'll be happy when I get this. I can't be content without this. See if you can recognize these thoughts as just thoughts, not necessarily truths. The Buddha gave very practical instructions for working with greed. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the foundational text on mindfulness, he taught that we should observe our mental states with clear awareness. When greed is present, we know greed is present. When greed is absent, we know greed is absent. This sounds simple, but it's actually revolutionary. Most of the time, we're so identified with our desires that we don't see them as desires. We just see objects that we need to acquire. By creating this small space of awareness, by recognizing this is greed, we begin to loosen its grip on us. there's a teaching from the Thai forest tradition that I find particularly helpful. Ajahn Sumedho, a Western monk who studied with Ajahn Chah, often speaks about the sound of silence. He points out that even in the midst of noise, there's an awareness that contains the noise, a silence that's always present. Similarly, even in the midst of strong desires and cravings, there's an awareness that contains these experiences. When we rest in that awareness, we're not fighting with our desires or trying to eliminate them. We're simply not being swept away by them. We're like the sky that contains clouds, but isn't affected by them. The Lankavatara Sutra contains a beautiful passage where the Buddha says, "Things are not what they seem, nor are they otherwise." This cryptic statement points to something important about greed. The objects we crave aren't inherently good or bad, satisfying or unsatisfying. Our relationship with them, our story about them, our craving for them, that's what creates suffering. A new car is just a machine for transportation. We add all the meaning, status, freedom, identity, happiness, and then we suffer when the car gets scratched, when it breaks down, when a newer model comes out. There is a practice that many Buddhist traditions use to work with greed: contemplation of death. Now, I know this might sound morbid, but stay with me. The Buddha encouraged his monks to regularly reflect on the fact that death is certain and its time is uncertain. Why? Because when we really take in the reality of our mortality, our priorities shift dramatically. The things we thought were so important, the objects of our craving, suddenly seem less compelling. What becomes important is how we're living right now, how we're treating others, whether we're present for this precious, fleeting life. There's a story about a king who asked a Zen master to write something of great wisdom that would guide his family for generations. The master wrote simply, "Father dies, son dies, grandson dies." The king was furious. "I asked for wisdom, and you give me this depressing statement?" The master replied calmly, "If your father dies before you, and you die before your son, and your son dies before his son, this is the natural order of things. This is the greatest blessing. But we forget this natural order. We live as if we and our loved ones will be here forever. This forgetting is the source of much suffering. When we remember impermanence, when we really let it in, greed loses much of its power. The Buddha also taught about contentment as an antidote to greed. In the Dhammapada, he says, "Contentment is the greatest wealth." But what is contentment? It's not about settling for less or giving up on growth and development. It's about recognizing sufficiency. It's about being able to say, "This is enough." In our consumer culture, this is a radical statement. We're constantly bombarded with messages telling us we need more, that we're incomplete without the latest product or experience. Contentment is the courage to step off that treadmill and recognize that we're actually okay right now. There's a beautiful story about Mahakashyapa, one of the Buddha's chief disciples. He was known for his ascetic practices and his contentment with very little. One day, the Buddha offered to exchange his own robe with Mahakashyapa's worn and patched robe. This was an incredible honor, as the Buddha's robe would have been made of fine material. But Mahakashyapa's response was telling. He accepted the exchange, not because he wanted a better robe, but out of respect for the Buddha's gesture. He wore the Buddha's robe with the same contentment he had worn his patched one. The robe didn't make him more or less content. His contentment came from within. Now, let's address something important. You might be wondering, if I let go of greed, if I stop striving and wanting, won't I become passive? Won't I lose my drive? This is a common concern, but it's based on a misunderstanding. The Buddha himself was incredibly active. He taught for 45 years, walking from village to village, adapting his teachings to different audiences, establishing a monastic community. He wasn't passive, but his actions weren't driven by greed or craving. They were driven by compassion and wisdom. The difference is this: when we act from greed, there's a quality of desperation, of never enough, of anxiety about outcomes. When we act from wisdom and compassion, there's a quality of fullness, of sufficiency, of peace, regardless of outcomes. We can work hard, pursue goals, and create things without being enslaved by the results. The Bhagavad Gita, though not a Buddhist text, expresses this beautifully. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. This is the essence of non-attached action. Let's talk about a specific type of greed that's particularly relevant in our modern world: the greed for experiences. We live in an experience economy where we're constantly seeking the next adventure, the next peak moment, the next Instagram-worthy experience. There's nothing wrong with enjoying experiences, but notice what happens when we're constantly chasing them. We're never quite here. We're always thinking about the next thing, planning the next trip, anticipating the next event. The present moment, which is the only moment we actually have, becomes just a stepping stone to some future experience we're craving. The Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, teaches about the concept of already arrived. He points out that we're always running toward some future moment when we think we'll finally be happy, finally be successful, finally be enough. But that future moment never comes, because when we get there, we're still in the habit of running toward the next thing. The practice is to recognize that we've already arrived. Right here, right now. This is it. This is life. When we really get this, greed begins to dissolve, because we're not lacking anything. We're already complete. There's a koan, a Zen riddle, that goes like this: what is your original face before your parents were born? This strange question is pointing to something beneath all our acquired desires and cravings. Before we learned to want things, before society told us what we should value, before we developed this sense of being a separate self that needs to acquire things to be complete, what were we? Who are we really? When we touch this original nature, even for a moment, greed is revealed as a kind of mistaken identity. We've been trying to satisfy something that doesn't actually exist in the way we thought it did. The Buddha taught that greed is one of the fetters that bind us to suffering, but he also taught that these fetters can be broken. In the Majjhima Nikaya, he describes the path of practice that leads to the abandoning of greed. It involves ethical conduct, meditation, and wisdom. Ethical conduct creates the foundation by helping us see the consequences of acting on our greed. When we lie, steal, or harm others out of greed, we directly experience the suffering this causes. Meditation helps us observe our desires without immediately acting on them, creating space between impulse and action. And wisdom helps us see through the illusion that acquiring things will make us complete. There was a monk who spent years meditating in a cave, working diligently on his practice. One day, he emerged from his retreat and walked to a nearby village. As he walked through the marketplace, he saw a beautiful piece of cloth. Immediately, desire arose in his mind. I could make a nice robe from that cloth, he thought. He noticed the desire and smiled. Then another thought arose. I should get rid of this desire. I'm a monk. I shouldn't want things. He noticed this thought too and smiled again. Then he simply continued walking, neither suppressing the desire nor acting on it. The desire arose, was seen clearly, and passed away like a cloud in the sky. This is the middle way that the Buddha taught. We're not trying to destroy desire or pretend we don't have preferences. We're learning to have a different relationship with our desires. We're learning to see them clearly, to understand their impermanent nature, and to not be controlled by them. This is freedom. Not freedom from ever experiencing desire, but freedom from being enslaved by it. As we come toward the end of our time together today, it is crucial to remember that working with greed isn't about becoming a perfect person who never wants anything. It's about becoming more aware, more awake, more free. Every time you notice greed arising and bring awareness to it, you're practicing. Every time you pause before automatically reaching for something, you're practicing. Every time you appreciate what you have rather than focusing on what you lack, you're practicing. The Buddha's final words, according to tradition, were, "All conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence." Even at the moment of his death, he was pointing to impermanence and encouraging continued practice. This is the path. Not perfection, but ongoing practice. Not the elimination of all desire, but the cultivation of wisdom and compassion that allows us to live with more freedom and less suffering. So, where do you go from here? How do you take these ancient teachings and make them relevant to your life today? Start simple. Today, just notice when greed or craving arises. Don't judge it. Don't try to fix it. Just notice it. Oh, there's wanting. See if you can feel where it lives in your body. Notice the thoughts that accompany it. This simple act of noticing is the beginning of transformation. Tomorrow, try practicing contentment for just 1 hour. For 60 minutes, consciously appreciate what you have rather than thinking about what you want. Notice how this feels. Does it create a sense of peace? Does resistance arise? Just observe with curiosity. And as you move through your days, remember that glass that Ajahn Chah held up. Everything you have, everything you want, is already broken. It's already impermanent. When you truly understand this, you can enjoy life fully without being enslaved by craving. You can want things without suffering over them. You can pursue goals without being desperate about outcomes. If this conversation has been valuable to you, please share it with someone who might benefit from these teachings and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. We're building a community of people who are committed to waking up, to living with more awareness and less suffering. Your presence here matters. Leave a comment below and let me know. What's one area of your life where greed or craving has been particularly strong? What's one practice you're going to try this week to work with it more skillfully? I read every comment, and I learned so much from this community's wisdom and experience. Remember, the path of awakening isn't about reaching some distant goal. It's about this moment, right here, right now. Can you be present with what is, rather than lost in craving for what might be? This is the practice. This is the path. And you're already on it. Just by being here. Just by being willing to look at these patterns with honesty and courage. Thank you for spending this time with me today. May you be free from suffering. May you know peace. And may you discover the contentment that's already here, waiting to be recognized. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other.